So the first thing is when we have this new document, you can go to the job information tab, and it's available both from the pre-processing toolbar as under the file menu. You can give the project a title if you want. It's just a note for the file. But under model characteristics, there's one very important feature in here, well, several actually, whether or not transverse symmetry should be applied. If you have a symmetric model, or for like the beam that we're going to model, you can simply check transverse symmetry and then only model half. And Maestro, when it does the analysis and everything, will enforce symmetry on the center plane. And when you do things like inquire about the weight summary for the model and everything, all of those items that are not on the center line will get mirrored to the other side, and it'll report values for the full model rather than just one half. Now, if you have an asymmetric model, and typically you probably will for most ships, you'll leave that turned off. But to start, what you can do is model half of the hull with transverse symmetry on, and actually whether it's on or off doesn't matter. You can mirror it, mirror what you've modeled from the parts tree to create the other side, and then modify it for any of those asymmetries that exist. This other box for a cut model, Maestro operates on like 3 levels of model. Level 0, level 1, and level 2 is how we refer to them. And level 0 is for just a portion of the hull. Essentially, if you wanted to model just the midship section and apply a bending moment and shear at either end, that would be a cut model. And this is how you indicate that you're only modeling a portion of the ship and you want to apply those boundary conditions at the ends. When you have this toggled on, and we'll get into the loading condition, or loading conditions later, you'll see this end moment is grayed out by default. If we were to, and we may have to actually create a loading condition here first, so we'll just create a dummy one, load case 1. And if I come in to the job information and turn on cut model, making it a level 0 model, you'll see that's now enabled. And we would be able to, and when you toggle that on, you get an additional tab here, and that's where you can apply your end moments for just that section of the hull that you're modeling. Typically we'll be doing the full model, but that's where you would turn it on. The other main thing here is the nodal join tolerance, and by default Maestro uses 1 millimeter for the nodal join tolerance, so that when you bring in various parts, if you import meshes or pieces of models from other Maestro files, when they come together, any nodes that are within that nodal joint tolerance will automatically be merged together and treated as a single node. When you're doing the modeling, Maestro tracks everything internally with what it refers to as an FE tag, a finite element tag. So every node in the model, every quad, every tri, each element that's created has its own unique FE tag in the model. And if you have multiple coincident points in space, they all get assigned to the same FE tag. And when Maestro is running the analysis internally, it's doing everything with FE tags. To present the data to the user, you would inquire based on the module and a quad and which quad it is in there. You don't directly interact with those FE tags. Some other things we can set up in here is in the environment is the density of the seawater and gravitational acceleration. And by default, this I think is 1025.9 kilograms per cubic meter, or it'll change, automatically adjust depending on which unit system we're using, as well as the standard gravitational acceleration. For the hull girder stations, we looked at that a little bit the other day, and that allows us to change the refinement along the length of the hull when we go to do, say, reporting out properties or displaying weight distribution along the length. By default, I think Maestro uses a standard 21 sections along the length of the hull, but they can be modified here if we want. And then finally, for the limit state criteria, right now we have none, but if we were to set it to Maestro or ALSAP, or some of these other ones, whether or not, I guess they're all listed here, but whether or not they're installed in Maestro would depend on whether or not you had those modules. But if we set the criteria to the the built-in native Maestro criteria for the limit state, you can modify some of the safety factors that are available here. On the parameters tab, this is a more recent tab. This I don't think is actually in the help file. It may be in the PDF. And actually in the, we looked at the online help file from the help menu here. There's also a PDF version of it installed with Maestro, which you can bring up just through the start menu item here. There may be some information on this in there, but basically these parameters are for, I believe these three are required for running Maestro Wave, and then for specific criteria or limit state criteria, such as the ABS high-speed naval craft, there are some other parameters that are used on some of the criteria. So you can input those parameters on this tab. And then finally, there's a comments sheet in here, which is essentially a notepad. If you want to make notes about sources of information, things that are still need to be modeled, things you want to go back and check, whatever, any notes for future reference, they can be saved with the file on this comments tab in the job information.